Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
How is everyone?
Good. Yeah. Technical issues aside, we're good.
Very well. There's something different today to this episode, isn't there? It's the reason why I feel like I'm slightly more nervous than usual. Priyank, why don't you tell us what we are doing different today than the other times?
Today we're doing something pretty cool. We are live streaming this on Facebook. So if you're with us on Facebook, you can comment live on our things, and we should be able to see that and respond. And we are on a partner Facebook page called Yogananda Friends.
Very cool. Very cool. And today, of course, we are talking, as we always do, about the movie Awake. Today we are talking about minute 11, which should be very interesting. Should we dive right in it? Oh, we didn't introduce ourselves today. I'm Mike, and as usual, here is Chris and Priyank. How is everyone doing today?
Yeah, good. It's been a nice weekend and a nice week since we last got together and talked. So keeping well, doing my readings, doing the meditations, getting into the energizations on the regular. So feeling good.
Cool.
Very good.
Yep, I'm very good, thank you. Excited to be doing this. For those who haven't listened to our podcast before, we discuss Awake, the movie Life of Yogananda, minute by minute, and review each minute in detail. And today we're reviewing minute 11 of the movie.
Very cool. Yeah, and let's dive right into it. So the minute starts by, I don't think it's the narrator, I think it's Vidal talking, right? He is talking about Yogananda. Let me actually read what he's saying.
I've got it, if you like.
You've got it? Okay, cool.
Yes. So Vidal, he says, we don't see him. He just says, Yogananda has been told since infancy by saints and seers that he'd be taking these teachings to the West. But he thought, how is this possible? You know, it was absurd because he barely spoke any English. And yeah, whilst he says that, there's about 5 different scenes, and we can discuss each of those scenes.
Yeah, exactly. So we already introduced Vidal in previous episodes, and the one thing that I find funny is that his struggle with English, and that he finds it inconceivable that he will speak English in the future. I guess it goes hand in hand with him not really being keen on going to school as well, and the whole idea of going to the West is like a bit foreign to him at this point. Yeah, but yeah, how about we jump into those scenes? What do we have there?
So we have, first of all, there's a lineage. We see like a faint, blurry image of the lineage of our gurus, only three of them. So we see Sri Yukteswar Lahiri Mahashai and Mahavatar Babaji, all sitting, meditating and cross-legged. And in the background, there's mountains and a forest.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Whenever I was watching this, can we continue to analyze and pitch in, or do we want to go slower on this one, Mike? I don't want to get too ahead of myself. But
as you wish, go for it.
Yeah, when I was watching this and I saw the gurus, and I was looking at the lineage there and about Yogananda talking about how he was going to go to the US and he didn't speak any English and how absurd this was. It just struck me the gravitas of what's really happened in the shift over the past 100 years in the West, and how you probably would struggle to find somebody in the West that hasn't heard the word like yoga, meditation, guru, and whether they really understand what it means and sort of know the depths of it. They've heard about it, you know, and it's really taken the Western world by storm over the past 100 years since Yogananda really broke the ground as such. And it just really is significant to my mind, like where are we going to be in the next 100 years, if we've come this far with the infusion of the East and the West. And it was just a pretty nice thought. Like, there's a lot of hope in that. I would suggest that if you went 100 years ago and started speaking to somebody on the street, they would probably tilt the head and think they've never heard these words before, not know any meaning to it. Yeah, hopefully a bright future for yoga in the West.
Yeah, that's certainly true for the West, but obviously the Eastern countries, they might not have said the word yoga, or I'm doing yoga, but they would certainly know what pranayama is, or any of the Buddhist techniques if you mentioned them in Tibet, etc.
Yeah, when I heard this sentence by Masvidal when he said that he didn't even think he would speak any English, I thought of this story when in the autobiography when Guruji went to Boston on the city of Sparta, and then he talks to someone and they tell him, hey, why don't you give a speech? And then he does it and he prepares for the speech, but it's so difficult for him to take his thoughts and put them into English. And then in the end, he stands there on stage, and I think he said even it took him like 10 minutes, and then he starts praying to God, and God says like, no, you do speak English. And then he just gave a very eloquent talk, and people applauded him on it, and later came and he said he had no idea what he was saying. Can you remember a word?
Let the divine intervention take over. Yeah, because later on Babaji met him, didn't he? Oh, sorry, in that ship. That was in a ship, right?
Yeah.
Somehow after Babaji met him. Let's talk about the lineage. So we see pictures of Sri Yukteswar Lahiri Masha and Mahavtar Babaji, and they're all in a sitting lotus or half lotus pose. We call it Urdhva Siddhasana. And I particularly love this pose that they're doing. If you look at any of my Instagram and Facebook profiles, I'm always trying to mimic that pose, obviously not very successfully, but I'm trying to create a new craze where, like, instead of people smiling for photos, they do this meditation pose. Hopefully it'll catch on.
Yeah.
Soon enough.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I've never, I think I've said on this podcast before and in previous minutes, I got into meditation, yoga, more or less in 2016, and get really into the meditation part, sitting down, not cross-legged, but just sitting down on the floor or on some kind of mat. My posture was that bad that my body would kind of reverberate and would shake with kind of tension, almost just with not wanting to sit straight with my legs on the floor, hamstring issues and all sorts. But now after a long time, I sat through it and breathed through it with the yoga. It really helped. And now I can really sit in sort of semi-lotus posture or something else. Yeah, you need to get in early. Try to start practicing that early, because I look at the full lotus posture and think I've got a lot of practice to go before I can achieve that. My body doesn't want to do that.
Interesting. That's interesting you say that, because when I was like 17 or something, when I started meditating and I'd sit on the floor, I was like adamant I'm going to sit on the floor and meditate, because that's how Indians meditate. Yeah. And I remember like my posture was so alien to me that I couldn't even sit still. Like my knees would shake, my shoulders would do this, my neck would twitch. So it took me many months before I could actually sit without twitches from the body, which is quite strange. But I was obviously getting to that stage as part of the process of trying to be in stillness, etc.
Yeah. And the real significance, right, like for anybody who's listening who doesn't know, is the spine, to keep the spinal cord erect. And as we said, we all correct our posture. Yeah, that's the important thing, right? So Yogananda talks about sitting down in a chair or even at your bed, sitting at the edge of your bed and being able to meditate. The important thing is the spine, keeping that erect. And Yogananda goes into depths of conversations around why that's important. But I suppose that could be a whole conversation in and of itself. So maybe
yeah. I think you guys are more advanced than me when it comes to lotus posture. I'm like, I like to meditate on the floor, but I always need a cushion. I'm gonna admit it. And semi lotus is the most I can do, and not for very long. Like my body, like if I do 1 hour of this, I don't feel my legs anymore. It's like I had to. And then I'm already scared of taking my legs apart again because I know how it's gonna feel. I'm like,
you get up and you walk on it. You have to hold on to things for about 2 seconds.
Mike, I think you're pretty good when you were here and meditating, and I saw you were pretty good. I was like, no, I can't do that. I mean, I've switched to using a chair now. I've like I gave that pipe dream up a long time.
Yeah, I'm trying, but like when I see some of those yogis sitting so relaxed in this posture, I'm like, wow.
Yeah, more yoga will help the meditation posture, right? To do all those asana yoga postures.
Yes.
But that's a whole other practice in and of itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then we see the next scene is a young Mukunda sitting on the floor.
Just before we go on break, can I just jump in? Because I was listening, so I'm stuck at home in my parents' house, and they've got this garden. You have a little ride-on lawnmower, and I went out at the weekend and I was cutting grass for my dad, and I was quite happily listening away to the SRF, one of the services, and if I can just get it up here, which one exactly? It was the Cosmic Mystery of Karma and Reincarnation by Brother Sivananda. And in there, he was talking about some of the stories where Yogananda would talk to some of the devotees in Bengali. And there was one of the monks was saying, he was desperate to find out why he was talked to in Bengali. And by the time he was traveling to meet Yogananda, and by the time he did and arrived, Yogananda anticipated the question before he arrived and announced there to the people that were there. I essentially spoke to you in Bengali because we shared a life together as monks, talking Bengali to each other, and that was quite funny because there was something there that Yogananda simply wanted to convey about language, and it kind of harks back to how significant it really is to Mike, your story there, where Yogananda had to pray simply for 10 minutes to try to draw in the language, almost to draw back the language and channel that. So God knows how many languages we've spoken in past lives that maybe if we prayed deeply enough with enough sincerity, we could simply draw upon, and how magical that really is. And just thought I'd share that before we moved on.
Nice. Yes. So we, as I was saying, we see young Mukunda sitting, and in the book it says that this is an archival photo of Paramahansa Yogananda as a boy. He was 11 years old when his beloved mother died in 1904.
Yeah,
it's quite a nice photo, isn't it? That one, I really like it. It's cute.
So sweet. Yeah, I really love this picture. I don't think I have it at the moment, but I used to have it printed out in my London flat somewhere. Yeah, and it's also like this context that it was taken when his mother died. It's like it shows this really great relationship that he had with his mother, this really strong love, and then when I remember reading in the autobiography when that chapter when his mother died, this was like the rug was swept under his feet. That was basically the love that was kind of sustaining him, supporting him, and it was suddenly gone. And he kind of he grieved a lot, but also he said this kind of made him not rely on other people's love, but on God's love solely, right? So he anchored himself strongly in the divine. It's very sad he had to do this in such a young age, but also he is an avatar. So he's lived his life for us and showed us how to do things right, and it must have been incredibly strong.
Yeah, I don't know if this is it probably is a silly comment, but looking at his face there, even as a young boy, he looks more masculine. There's more masculine features there because he's got super feminine features, doesn't he? As he grew older, and he often commented on stories how people would mistake him maybe for a female. But he almost, it's funny how the shape, the face shape.
I think his hair is also very short in that picture, right?
Yeah, that's probably one reason.
Might make a difference as well.
Would you recognize him in that picture as Yogananda? If I gave you if you hadn't seen that and you saw 10 different images of young boys, would you be able to say, "Oh, yep, that's my guru in the making"?
Yeah, if you ask me for an honest answer, maybe not. Probably not.
We need to work on your intuition, guys.
Intuition, but I mean, you would definitely look at the picture and think there's somebody who's sitting in a meditative posture, who is really sitting with that posture. As a young individual, he looks like he's really sitting with that moment, and there's something significant just looking and how he's just so relaxed, and he's just so content, and he's got this kind of quite studious look in his face. There's definitely something you could easily look at that as a layperson and think, geez, there's somebody who's clearly quite deep in their thought, even as a young child. So if that counts for anything. Sure.
Yeah, I don't think I would have, because he does look. I don't think he looks very much already like he looks in his older version, but yeah, I mean, it's a very well-known picture, I guess that's why. Yeah, we'll see more pictures of Yogananda as the minutes go on, and you can see quite clear transitions. He had a bit of a beard, and so forth, and yeah, so he's very, very much looking quite different there with the short hair and everything. So yeah. Yes, for sure. And then we go, as he keeps talking, then we start seeing bicycles and rickshaws, and this, I guess, typical street scenes in India. What do you think about that?
This is the picture we refer.
Oh yeah, this is the one. Yeah, this is the one. Very nice. Yeah. What is he wearing around his? What is he wearing around his neck?
That is like a mala. It looks like a necklace. Hold on, let me check it. Oh no, it's not a mala. I don't know. I think it's just some decorative thing.
I don't know why I'm thinking of his mother when I look at that. Maybe it's some kind of intuition picking up.
It definitely looks like her. She does look like his mother, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, for podcast listeners, sorry about that. You'll have to watch the YouTube video. Yep. Should we carry on? Yeah, you said you saw ancient footage of bikes and cycle rickshaws. Yeah, this is quite old. This must be 100 or over 50 years old. It's black and white and very old, and you can tell that it's old because
there's only very few frames per second as well, right?
Yeah. So it's old footage, and it's also like there's no motor vehicles. It's all like cycles, people walking, but there is concrete. So
yeah. And then it also goes like the next scene that you see, he talks about it says Ranchi, India on the bottom, and then you see I think it's like football that they're playing. They're like shooting a penalty or something. You say playing football in a dhoti. What is that exactly?
Yeah, so it's quite funny. There's like a group of like 15, 20 boys. And then there must be their teacher, because he's the one he's taking a penalty with the boy, and funnily he's wearing a dhoti. So a dhoti is like just a long cloth, long white cloth usually, and you kind of wrap it around each leg and then up and over, and it looks really cool when even wearing one is pretty cool. Pretty comfortable as well. They're really well suited for an Indian climate. So this teacher, he kind of takes a shot, misses, or the guy saves it, and then he misses the follow-up completely. He misses the ball. It's really fun. It's a really cool video. I don't know where they got it from.
Would you say a dhoti is ideal to play football with?
I'd love to see a football game with people wearing dhotis. That'd be cool. But it's cool. You mentioned that 1920, and then you mentioned Ranchi. But that's not chronological, is it now? So we've gone to I think we've gone to the school, his school that he was there at. But now so we've gone from his childhood and suddenly gone to his school that he established. So he's gone forward, and then in the next couple of minutes he's going to go backwards as well. So now at this point it stops being a biography, and it becomes more artistic use of storytelling in terms of what's relevant for what part of the film for the viewer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I feel like it's also putting it in line because the whole idea of going to the West is about sharing the teachings in the West, and I guess having the school in Ranchi is basically fulfilling that same thing, but in India.
Oh yes.
So
yes.
I guess they're trying to connect it a bit like that. I liked. I saw Chris mentioned the article from the chapter from the autobiography. Do you want to talk about this, Chris?
Is this for Ranchi?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think in the next minute there's going to be quite a lot on Ranchi. So there's probably enough to talk about for some time. So I think maybe we'll postpone more detail on Ranchi and that school and save that for the future minute, because there's substantial content there.
Have you been to the school, Mike?
I have not. I've never been to Ranchi. That is like I've been to India twice, and each time I was planning to go there, and each time for different reasons we were planning things, and it just never worked out for me to go. I really want to go. I did go to the first version of his school, which is closer to Kolkata. I think it's called Dihika, and I went there. But you didn't. You saw the remains of the old school there, but there wasn't really much left there. Ranchi, of course, turned into this beautiful, massive YSS ashram now, and I really want to see that one day.
Wonder if they've still got that football pitch with the penalties.
That would be a very good feature. Yes. Have you been there?
No, I haven't. No, that's my high on my list of priorities when we're allowed to travel.
I always thought that if ever I had a child, I would want to send the child to like a Ranchi school or
to play football.
Exactly, just learn how to play goalkeeper. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think more. There's plenty to talk about there, and people hear this thing already maybe know about Ranchi School, but there's plenty of content for future reference. And,
I think Guruji mentioned this in many places. I think I read it the other day in Metaphysical Healing Meditation, a little booklet where he says all the millions that we spend on an education system, we should take some of that money and spend it on how to live schools and teach our children to meditate. That would help a lot. So yeah.
Untold wealth would be unlocked if I would say as well. Yeah. But no, it's cool that it mentions it. It's really cool that it has they include the footage this early on, and I guess the last 30 seconds or so you're transported. You keep getting transported back to India, 100 years ago, which is epic, and what it must be like to live there, and to go back to the rickshaws and to see all the footage. There's some nostalgia, I think, for me. I would have loved to be there. Maybe, who knows? Maybe people were there at the time, but a world away from Northern Ireland, where I grew up. Even back 100 years ago. It looks quite busy and quite an active place,
Yeah, it was an interesting time as well, right? Because I think YSS was founded 3 years before SRF in 1917, right? And that was around that time. That was probably when he was in Ranchi, I'm guessing. Correct me if I'm wrong. or around that time when he founded his first school there.
Yeah, he was 27, I think. Well, so long days. Well, this says, the video says that 27, doesn't he? Yogananda in 1920 he was 27. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it probably was around that time.
Pretty cool. Right, and then we can move on to the next section, where you see like them like lighting a candle. You see a picture of someone lighting a candle, and then the narrator talks about. Is it the narrator? It's basically in the voice the voice of Yogananda Anupam Kher, right? Who basically says, one day my mind went away from Ranchi. He went to the storeroom to meditate, and I fell into an ecstasy. Amazing. And then he saw America, and then he says, surely these people are American. And then you see a lot of interesting pictures in this sequence, right? Like, is there any picture that like comes to mind immediately that you found super interesting?
Good storytelling arc, isn't it? Because they're taking us back to important events of that sort of time and how it's relevant for today's time. So, for example, they had like just a close up of someone's eye, and inside the eye was that person witnessing the atomic bomb, or something that looked like a big mushroom that probably was the atomic bomb. And then it switches the next scene. These are just flash images, switches the next scene to, I think, the Large Hadron Collider in CERN, in Switzerland. So like, this is like the pinnacle of science and technology from what, the destruction that was then to the positive influence of science that is today, which is exploring the mysteries of the universe. So those are two really good scenes that I liked. And I like how they linked Ranchi to that in today from 100 years to today.
Yeah,
go for it.
They've made it flow quite nicely, and I think as a layperson you're watching it thinking, this is incredible, because the two, again, to the layperson, you think of yogic powers as this like great seductive like ability to see into the future, to see the past, and kind of be omnipresent, and there's something quite captivating, really, to see this few seconds of potentially what it might have been like to be Yogananda, as quite a young man, really, seeing some potential different future that he was going to be a part of. It's crazy. It really blows my mind. But what I thought was quite funny was, he goes into the store, not funny, but he goes into the store to meditate. He just feels like he has to meditate. He's kind of dropping, so to speak, into meditation, into that meditative state, and he has to take himself away and find a room where he can meditate. And I just love how it's a storeroom. It's nothing flashy, it's nothing fancy, and it just, again, makes me put the spotlight of my mind onto me, and how often do we put off meditation for want of some idyllic place to meditate.
I think it's attic, isn't it? Is the attic room that he gave it to him, he designated to himself when they moved to that house. But in this scene, I don't know if he did this because it's not written in the autobiography, but kind of depicts him in the attic room meditating, and he got a little altar, which has just got flowers. I don't see any images. And then he lights a dio, which is a ghee lamp. So ghee is clarified butter, and he's lighting a lamp. And I think that's done quite a lot in India for any kind of auspicious event, such as a prayer or a puja or a meditation. And it kind of changes, like, you should try, I don't know if you guys have tried this, but just even in that little flame changes the environment, changes the air. It has a big sort of influence. I know we all kind of love fire, don't we? We all get hypnotized by fire, but even in its presence, when your eyes are shut, there's something deep that happens. I don't know if you guys feel that.
Yeah, it's funny you said. It's a good thing to pick up on. And I wonder if the directors or the producers really knew what they were doing there, because Sadhguru, I mentioned Sadhguru all the time. He's someone who talks about this in some detail, about having a lantern lit, with vegetable oil in your home, and that is to do with purification. Right, to your point, there's something more happening, and it's maybe this is like a fire bath, right? And you maybe know more about this than I do, coming from Northern Ireland. We're not accustomed to this way of thinking, but you have a water bath, you have an actual bath or a shower. You tend to clean yourself, but you would have a wind bath and so forth. With the different elements, mud bath, etc. So.
You said four of the 5 elements there.
For the 5.
What was the 5th one?
Air, water.
You missed ether.
Ether did it.
Ether. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good. But I suppose meditating is the ether bath, isn't it? Because you're connected to that space beyond the space. So Chris, you're pretty good, mate. Without even trying, you just stated all the quite deep sides and the elemental sides in Hindu law.
But I would love to study this more. If anybody's listening has information on it, please share, because I'm quite keen to do any reading on this. And if you guys know, share. If Yogananda has material on it, I'm not entirely familiar, but. Yeah, that's my understanding. It's cleansing, right? It's cleansing the mind, the emotional body, the different bodies that we have. Yogananda, I think, talks primarily about 3, but there's maybe 5, so to speak. But
have you ever tried this candle type meditation?
Yeah, I mean, my mum is mad for candles, so I think I inherited it through her. I'd always have a candle of something, and she's quite, a spiritual person in her own right, so I'm sure there's something to that. But there's candles everywhere. It's just such a fire hazard, because everything's carpeted as well.
Good combo. Mike, do you ever use candles for meditation?
Sometimes, yeah. I actually use incense more often, because I like the smell. I'm not like I do know. Like when I go to a service, to a center or to a temple, and they have like candles for one of the celebrations, it is magical. But I rarely do it at home. I have a question about like if you want to burn ghee or vegetable oil, do you need a special candle lamp for that, or what do you use there? I know, Priyank, you have everything.
You just need
equipped with this stuff.
My wife keeps everything that we would possibly need in that respect. I've actually got one set up there. But so
Sure.
you get a wick, and you can even use a cup. You can use a jar. You can use.
It should be metal, right? It shouldn't be like plastic.
Yeah, well, obviously. But in terms of the science, doesn't need to be like brass or copper or anything like that. The more important thing is to actually create that agni, or the fire element, in the space. So yeah.
Interesting. No, I do want that. I also wonder if it's ghee, does it start smelling like butter, or is it?
And no, it doesn't. It's got a very, very subtle fragrance. Actually, when you do vegetable oil, you get a bit more of a weird smell. And actually, the color of the lamp is different depending on which type of oils you use, or ghee. That's why ghee is really important, because the color of the flame is really puts you in a meditative space, and it's a really there must be some depth to it, but it's important. Yeah.
I just wonder, could you do the vegetable oil with like some lavender or something? Into it? Like how far can we go before start messing with things?
Start wrecking everything.
So yeah, how pure do we need it to be? Because I don't think I could get away with some funky smelling, vegetable oil candle in this house. Everything has to be pungent or, smelling pretty.
Yeah, everything looks quite prim and proper in the old background.
Yeah, well, I would have it. It was my way outside. But yeah, it's that.
Nice. And then should we talk about, so he says he sees America, those people are Americans. And should we talk about some of the faces we see in there? Do you recognize anybody, Priyak?
So firstly, there's this random shot of a moon landing shot. So I think you see a flag on the moon. And we can debate whether it's like propped up still in a lab or on the moon itself.
It's all done in Hollywood, mate.
But yeah, we see that. Obviously, the pinnacle, again, it goes to the pinnacle of still to this day, our greatest achievement, isn't it? Landing on the moon, and it hasn't been, by man, it hasn't been replicated. And then there's a Ford. There's an old Ford car being taken off a ship. And there's I think that might be reminiscent of, or that could be footage of when Yogananda went to India after 3 Ukdesh recording back. And so there's that image. Yeah, there's that image. There's a faint image of like a selfie, isn't it? I don't know how he took this selfie, but there's this guy who is on the foreground of the Ford. I didn't recognize him personally. Did you, either of you guys?
Yeah, I thought it might have been, initially what triggered it was, I wonder, is this Yogananda's famous Ford that he drove around Europe on his road trip. But then I looked up Richard Wright, who he was with, and saw his picture and thought, actually, that looks like it could well be Richard Wright. And if it is, then that could well be the car that they used to travel together. So
I think so. I think you're spot on there.
Good.
Yeah.
It's funny because if you guys watch this film, you probably won't even notice those shots. But we're obviously dissecting every single minute and every single frame. So we want to get inside the mind of the directors and the writers. So that's why we think it's important.
It is, because I feel like if you don't do it actively, it still goes into your subconscious anyways. And so we're just analyzing what we're getting there.
Yeah. And Richard Wright, he was, maybe I didn't say he was Yogananda's secretary. He was the secretary for some 8 years or so. And really, really was close with Yogananda. I think would share a room, to sleep in the same room as him and things like this. So what an awesome role that must have been to be his personal secretary, to follow him around and his right-hand man, essentially, in many respects.
Yeah.
So no wonder he's smiling.
He's also the brother of Sister Dayamata, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Pretty awesome.
Apparently he wrote had a pretty epic journal from that journey.
Yes, not yet to be shared, I believe. Is that the case?
I don't think it's shared. I haven't read it. Maybe you listeners can tell us.
Yeah, maybe there's still a great book coming out about that or something.
Adventures of Dick.
Yeah,
it was a pretty epic road trip that they did, right? They went through all of Europe. I think they went Egypt, and then they went all over India as well with it, right?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. There's lots of stories about how the trusty old Ford would just chug along, just wouldn't give up over some pretty rough terrain.
Yeah, and wherever they came, this car was perceived as modern and luxurious, right? I don't think in most other countries they have those kind of cars.
Yeah,
it would have been quite leading back in the day. And obviously, very reliable. So he picked the right thing. Yeah, he did a huge trip, didn't he? I don't think we don't need to get into it now, but he did a trip that I would love to do in this day and age, and he managed to do it 100 years ago or so. I can barely do it in this day and age with all the resources we have. So it must have been some trip.
Yeah, and back in the day, everything was different, right? You had to show passports at every border in Europe. You had to find right gasoline for your car. I'm not sure if that was a problem back in the day, but at some point you still had to go to the pharmacy to buy gasoline, right? In tiny amounts. He bought like a few liters and filled it up.
It's funny. It's like his ambition, to prove how attuned he was to God, right? He said to his brother when he was young, I think he made a bet. Correct me on the story, guys. Jump in, but he made some kind of a bet with his brother that he could go away for 1 day or 2 days and come back, prim and proper, nothing wrong, and absolutely everything fine. And he jumped on a train, went to a different city, and is this triggering memories for you? You know the story in detail. He managed to come across people, and he was fed and given a place to stay, and he went away with his best friend, I think, at the time, right? So he clearly puts his faith in God first, thinks about God first in his travels. So I'm sure he was equally looked after on that trip, no doubt.
Yes, for sure. Probably necessary as well. But maybe he was the first road tripper back in the day. Nice.
First selfie by the looks of that picture.
Yeah. And then there comes a picture of at the time famous opera singer. She was pretty famous in America, and she was an Italian. Her name is Amelita Galli-Curci. And you see her often. Like there's a picture of her in the autobiography of a yogi. You go to Lake Shrine and you see some pictures of Yogananda there, and she appears there. I am not sure, but I think she's even featured in the Lake Shrine dedication film. I think she's sitting there with him as well.
And what kind of was she good? Have you heard her before?
I have not heard her before. Until like 3 minutes ago when I downloaded a section, and I want to share that with you guys now. So let's listen to like 20 seconds of her. That is her singing La Traviata by Giuseppe Verdi. And the song is called Sempre Libera, and it's just a small section of it. There we go.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I definitely couldn't have done that last part.
Everything else perfect.
Everything else.
I often sing that one in the shower, actually. That was really, really very moving, actually. I'm usually not a big fan of opera, but there was some hidden depth in her voice, a lot of feeling. It was very, very lovely.
Lots of joy, wasn't it? Just very, very joyful. Very nice.
Very enjoyable. The kind of pictures that were shown there, I think we went through most of them. There was one thing that I found interesting when I saw, there was this one picture that kind of looked like pre-anxiety at the Large Hadron Collider, right? And where they, it is interesting because they kind of are trying to figure out how the universe was created. I'm not sure if we will ever figure this out perfectly, but this is they were looking for the Higgs boson, and they confirmed it in 2012. And they also nicknamed it the God particle. So it's like in theoretical physics, it brought us one step further towards understanding how this universe was created, and very interesting. And I was like Googling this, like I was wondering what a boson was. And I kind of then saw that it had to do with someone called Bose, and basically a boson means it's a particle that follows the Bose-Einstein statistics. And I was like, Bose, interesting. So because of course, Guruji mentions Jagadish Chandra Bose in the Autobiography of a Yogi, and I was like, maybe it's him. But then I figured out it's not him. It's named after an Indian mathematician called Satyendranath Bose. And yeah, I felt like I had to mention this in case anyone ever thought there might be a connection there.
I always, because Bose has become quite a famous name. I think it was Satya. What was his name? Satya. No,
Jagadish Chandra
no,
Bose.
they're the second one, the one that actually did the Einstein Bose.
Oh yeah, his name was Satyendra.
Satyendra, yes. So he the one also that did a lot of work in acoustics. He did because like the Bose company or the speakers, they're still like they're world renowned, aren't they? They're still like the best in sound quality.
Oh wow! I never made the connection to the speaker brand. Very interesting.
It was it is. It's after that, and obviously it's high end, very high specification, so very high, very expensive. But yeah, so it's from that. So interestingly, they were born, I think, about 30 or 40 years apart in the same region. So Jagadish Chandra Bose was born first 40 years earlier in the mid 1840s or 50s or something like that, and Satya whatever Bose was later.
Satyendra.
Yeah. Satyendra. It's a hard one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe they even knew each other. You never know.
Yeah, I was actually trying to research that actually once because I was interested in both and like where's that etymology, and I couldn't find any like formal like any sort of family relation or anything like that, or schooling or tuition or something that would have been cool, but I couldn't find anything. Listeners, if you do know something, that would be pretty cool to hear about.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, because I really enjoyed the chapter in the Autobiography of a Yogi on Jagadish Chandra Bose, because all the kind of things that he's researching. I think you talked about plant growth and stuff like that, and I was like, this might be fields that we might make advances in the future or already are.
Yeah, and what struck me about that chapter is also that he compared, he tried to look for pain receptors in just in a material, so like steel or like
that's right.
whatever, and he found that it exists. So like if you put a flame or something to it, it recognizes it, or if you like strike it, then I think that there was more depth to that. But that was really interesting.
Sorry, is this the story of the plant?
No, so he did do plants. Is it spectroscope? I think but he also used it for just inert, materials like steel and stuff like that, and found that they've got a very complex sensory reactory system that is similar to plants. And
we actually like confirmed some of this by now. Like for example, we thought that if you have like a steel beam, the steel beam would just always have the same properties, but apparently there is something called like material fatigue. So if you use the steel beam continuously with the same pressure, it will at some point get tired and break. But if you give it time to rest, it will restore some of its.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is quite interesting, because we think of a lot of materials that we use as not living or dead, and I guess it's not so.
It's all descended from spirit, isn't it? Spirit matter. From spirit to spirit goes.
Spirit and nature dancing together. Victory to spirit.
Yeah. I love that. Just on that note, I love the word victory. Whenever I hear that song, it literally, there's something about that song particularly, it's so uplifting.
I was thinking about that today, actually, because we translate that, the word Jai, like Jai Guru, which we say it often at the start and end of this podcast, and people greet each other. They also say Jai Sri Krishna, or Jai, or whatever guru that you may follow, and it's often translated just as victory. Jai is victory. And in my heart, before I knew Gujarati or the Indian languages, before I knew English, and it's like a very crude translation, victory, like J. It's got much. Victory is, it doesn't encapsulate the full feeling of the word J, because there's, in J, I see like reverence, prayerfulness, and that isn't necessarily, it doesn't come about when you say the word victory, does it? Even though if you dig deeper, and we're talking about victory of the soul, etc. So it's there, but in English it's quite crude. When you hear Jai Guru, how do you guys like feel when you say it or hear it? Do you donate all the stuff, the other things that I just said about prayerfulness and reverence and other things like that?
I feel like because first of all, I learned those words and I learned the meaning of them later. So it became a bit like second nature a bit to just say them. But also there a lot of times, like Guruji talks about, like when you actually say things in Sanskrit and use them in their original meaning, they carry their own vibration, they carry beyond any kind of translation that you can bring. So I'm not sure it's necessary each time you say Jai Guru to think of victory. I mean, you can, but I just feel like Jai Guru just carries its own vibration. And yeah, of course, this thought, victory of the Guru, is amazing, is a great thought as well. So I'm not gonna push that aside.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I've heard it is SRF, and that was the first time, 2016, and I had no idea what it meant until really your definition today. I didn't even think about what the actual definition would be, but yeah, the feeling that I get from it is reverence, is devotion, is the love. It's basically just saying like, I love you, my master, kind of thing. Like that's what I, when I pray and I say Jai, like that's the feeling. It's just love. That's what I get.
Another thing is, like, oftentimes people also say Om Guru, right? And like Om is like this eternal sound, right? It's like there's this Om vibration that created creation and was before everything. And what does it then mean when you say Om Guru? I feel like when I say it, it fills me with strength. It makes me feel good. But what am I actually saying?
So Om Guru is and I'm completely unqualified to talk about this. Om Guru is much more fundamental than Jai Guru. Om Guru is almost a mantra. So Om is obviously probably one of the most important mantra sounds that there is. So when you say Om Guru, meaning is completely irrelevant. Just the reciting Om and then Guru is just that mantra. If you repeat that as a lot of people do with japa meditation, then that process in itself can be the transforming influence, because you're connecting. So Om, you said that Christ consciousness or Krishna consciousness, or in Christianity we say the Holy Ghost in creation. So creation, the sound in creation is Om, and I think scientific satellites and in space have actually detected parts of that sound. That's just the murmur sound that's always there in the background. And in the West, that's just, oh, that's a nice sound. But Om, we actually use that as a mantra. So yeah, so you're actually connecting to the source of creation using that mantra. So it's a transforming process in that it's not just about prayer and reverence as Jai Guru is usually used, but Om Guru is really, it's a meditation in itself. It's a way to transform yourself without, you don't even need to know what it means, what you're doing. If you just do it and just do it with devotion, then just that process can transform you.
It's like a purification. I kind of think it's like a vocal bath.
Chris, did you have a bath today? You're talking about baths a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The subconscious mind is prompting me. It's like for me, it's kind of like it's a purification of thought, literally. Whenever I say it's almost purifying the mind before thinking of the Guru. When you say that, that's what occurs to me. because you know the chanting, the Om chant, it feels like it's like it washes over me, you know, not to continue with his path or anything, but that's what it feels like, a wash. Just it feels like it's washing your soul. So it's like kind of washing your hands before you would touch the feet or something.
Yeah, and a lot of people use Om Guru to, and some of the ministers, Brother Smarananda talks about this. For example, after a meditation practice, he says you should sit, 5, 10, however long you can, sit in stillness. So he says, for example, after you've eaten a good meal, one doesn't just get up and carry on. He enjoys the feeling of a satisfactory meal, and sits and perhaps engages in a conversation, etc., with loved ones. So similarly, when we've done all that work in meditation to get to that place of stillness, we're using the techniques, then you need to sit and enjoy the stillness, because that's what you're working for. Because in that stillness, that's when real communion with God can happen. And Brother Smarananda of YSS, he says that if that stillness isn't there or doesn't come, then chant Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru, and you'll find that if you do it, then it will come, and you'll start to enjoy that stillness. And usually it feels like, oh, you've already done like 20 minutes, half an hour, however long. Do you need to spend another 5 minutes in the stillness? But that's what you're working. That's the whole point of what you're trying to achieve. You've worked to get to that place of stillness. So you have to. That's your goal. That's where you want to get to.
I find that in the morning. I don't know if you guys find that. I wake up in the morning and I just wanted to keep the mouth shut for a while and not speak too much and not break that silence. It's kind of like a fast. I don't want to break the fast of silence and stillness that you get during sleep. I always find that if you're trying to talk to me in the morning, I'm probably likely to ignore you. not in any grumpy way, just because you just want to keep the peace. Yeah, I agree.
No, that's very nice. I'm not always like that. I sometimes wake up and I feel like very interiorized and want to meditate right away. And sometimes I wake up and I feel like I need to do this. I dreamt of this and I need to do it now.
You're just seeing numbers of data science just run down.
That's correct, yes.
Do you guys sit in stillness afterwards, after meditation, or like generally?
Yeah.
Often?
Yeah. I feel like this is the most enjoyable part of meditation, because this is like, I think Guruji says it somewhere, you've done the work and now you kind of get to enjoy it, and also you do the techniques that's like your message, and then you're waiting for the answer, or then you let God talk. I feel like this is I'm not gonna say the most important part, but an essential part of meditating. Yeah.
I think I probably did a whole lot more before than what I do these days, to be honest with you. Probably more at night time than morning time, because typically, the classic, after a certain amount of time, you're probably starting to think about your breakfast and your day's chores and all this stuff. So it probably affects me less in the morning, and at night time I can kind of go to bed, just lie down in that stillness and just drift off, eventually. So yeah. It's a good reminder, actually, guys. Thanks for that. I'll need to factor in an extra bit of time in the morning to really sit with the stillness after.
It's definitely easier when you're not under time pressure, right? So when you're like, I feel like on the weekends, I always have the best meditations. Is that the same for you guys?
Yeah, it depends. I would say, like, yeah, depends on the weekend. But yeah, absolutely. If you've got more time, you don't have, places to be or things to do. So, for sure.
I actually feel the inverse of that, Mike. So, like, for example, if I'm going to work, so I'm going in tomorrow, I've got to get up pretty early, and so I know that my meditation, I've got to get up at this amount of time to get an hour's meditation, for example. Now I know I've only got an hour, and somehow that means that my focus is better and my concentration is better, and like my thoughts are much less sporadic, etc. I can focus much more, and stillness is much much deeper. And yeah, it's weird because then logically, then on the weekend, then I should be in like Sabikalpa Samadhi, then if that's the case, but that's not what happens. That is definitely not what happens. I find that when I know I've got a short time, I somehow put much more effort and focus into it. And then for some reason on the weekend, then the inverse applies. And I'm like, oh, I'll get deeper. No, I've got all day. I've got, it's strange.
Yeah, the human mind is a tricky thing. Best friend and worst enemy. I agree. Like, and Yogananda says, like, even if you can meditate for 5 minutes, do it. And there probably is something behind that. One's good habit forming, but if you have an intense, if you know you've only got 5 minutes, how quickly would you try to drop into meditation states? Your subconscious mind will hopefully really give way. But lovely.
Nice. All right. So I think this concludes minute 11. Unless anyone has anything else.
Yeah, one quick question.
Yes.
He says, the narrator says, America, surely these people are Americans. What does that mean? I read the autobiography, and this is a quote from the autobiography. I distinctly remember. And now that the narrator says, Anupam Kher says it, I'm hoping one of you guys can explain what that, because it doesn't really make sense English-wise. Like no one's asking him, or refuting. He's not refuting anything. He's just saying stuff. So what does he mean?
It's interesting. Like I thought about this a few times, like in the way of, if you live in India in the 1920s, so what is your picture of other countries? What do you know? I mean, you probably have some idea of the British, right? So you have some kind of connection with but America, do Americans ever visit India at this time? Do you ever see them? Maybe they did, and he and Guruji met some Americans in Kolkata maybe, and then he saw that in his vision and was like, oh, they look like those people. Because also there was no television back then, right? So you had to go by maybe brands. Maybe there were like brands that were typically American that he saw. I'm not really sure what the perception in that time was of the West, and if there was even that concept of the West that you would say like, oh, people in Europe and America are like that, kind of similar, or not. I actually don't know, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure like everybody has an idea of what an American, or my fiance would slap me in the wrist, but technically I suppose the United States, like people from the US.
All right,
rather than the whole of America.
Yeah.
North America. Everybody has like some sort of idea of what they might look like, whether it's the sporty version of America these days is the shorts and the high socks and the kind of polo t-shirts, the golfer type. But no, I'm sure what comes to my mind back in those days is probably the kind of dancing and freedom that comes with being somebody from the United States at that time. That was very, very progressive. It was kind of like the light of the world in terms of progressiveness in many respects, but really materialistic. Yogananda talked about the materialism of the West. So maybe it was more wealth of cars and material, with different clothes and different customs that, he would have been accustomed to seeing in his mind's eye from any other cultures. And I would suggest it's probably more the dress code. If you have an idea of what the British person looks like, etc., the US person looks quite different to some respect. Different suits anyway, that's for sure.
That does explain it actually, and so, and also the scenes that you mentioned, the American, the typical cultural American culture, etc. Is I think there's in a couple of minutes time when he goes to America, there's various scenes of that in the film. So yeah, that's probably what he's referring to. So then, if I may, then does that mean that he's the question isn't there, but someone's asking him, or God is telling him, you must go to America because God because America needs your spirituality and your guidance. So then he's responding saying, America, surely these people are Americans, as in all the craziness that's happening there. Is that right?
Well, it said at the beginning of the minute, didn't it, that from a young age, you know, Yogananda had been told by many saints and seers that he would go to the West. So, yeah, I'm sure that was in his subconscious. That was probably in there, thinking that this was something that he wanted to put off. I'm sure, given the stories that we've heard, to go to the West. But something that would have been brewing in his superconscious mind for some time.
I do think this kind of foreign thought, because when you just hear it, you go like, you will one day go to America, you go like, what does that even mean? And then you see the vision of it, suddenly this whole thought fills with like this whole feeling. Like he probably felt emotions as well. He probably felt how this country feels like, and he maybe even saw some of the people, like they showed faces in the movie, right? So he maybe already saw some of the people he would meet there, right?
Like a Texan with a big cowboy hat. You know, there's no mistaking that. Really, nobody else in the world was.
Yeah, they got a little glimpse of it, and America. I think it's pretty great that he kind of. I mean, I wonder if he was really sitting there and saying, "America, those people are Americans," or if it was more of an intuitive experience that he actually had, right? And later on, he figured out, oh yeah, that this is America. Those are Americans.
I think there was maybe one picture that we didn't talk about. Maybe
I think that's James Lynn. So there's a chap standing. Mike, if you look at the bottom of the trailer, there's a man standing on or kneeling on a pole, with one foot on a pole, and he's got a cowboy hat. I think it's James Lynn, is it?
That could be right. It
looks a bit like him. Yeah.
Yes.
James Lynn, obviously, for those who don't know, was the first president of Self-Realization Fellowship.
Yeah.
Yes.
Rajasi
Janakananda.
Who became the great Western yogi, as Yogananda described him as Rajasi Janakananda.
Yeah,
and all of our ministers then took the Ananda name. So every name is Ananda, isn't it?
Almost. Some of them aren't. Like
really?
Brother Premamoy, right? Brother Anandamoy, right?
That's true. Yeah.
But there's very few that don't have it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and maybe worth tying in here with James Lynn or Janakananda. He, a wealthy US businessman, really was key to Yogananda's ability to do what he did, right? So Yogananda going to the West, going to America, would have been hit with so many questions of how am I going to do this? And it's amazing how then, as children of God, and how we're not separate and there is all one, that it's all coming together as a part of a plan. He has stepped in to donate, I think it was $6 million to SRF, which is huge, really, back in 1932. And that really allows the building blocks to take shape and take place, and Yogananda to really go on to do his work. So it's lovely that they included that picture and included that image in amongst other very important images in his vision of the US. And I just wonder, did Yogananda maybe see this happening prior to all happening, and maybe see the pictures of the very important people that he was going to interact with like this? So he does say in his teachings, like, look out for people that you spent previous lives with in this life, and I'm sure he probably had visions of people that he was going to work with in this life. So yeah, nice inclusive.
Or perhaps even past disciples.
Yeah.
handpicked to be reborn and
what?
help him in various elements of his life. And obviously at the same time, he helps them burn the last vestiges of karma that they may or may not hold.
Yeah.
It's funny, right? How you live your first half of your life. I think he made his money in oil. Is that correct, or is it insurance, something like that? And so you're basically this super materialistic businessman, and then you go like, oh, I just found my guru, and then this is no more, and then you change completely.
Yeah, it said Lynn was a self-made business magnate. He was suffering from nervousness and dissatisfaction when he met Paramahansa Yogananda in 1932. And he later said that I became aware of the first time in years that I was sitting very still. I had found entrance into a spiritual realm previously unknown to me. That was James Lynn talking when he met Yogananda. So yeah, an awesome coming together of the material wealth of the West and the spiritual wealth of the East.
Exactly. All right. Should we wrap it up here?
Yeah, I think we've covered
minute 11 pretty well.
Yes.
Please.
Thank you for those who joined us live. It's been a pleasure to have you. Hopefully we'll see you soon again. We may do one of these in the future again.
Yeah, and for anybody listening, jump in with questions, anything we might have missed, any comments, you want to interact with us, please do.
Yes, and let us know what you prefer, if you prefer the podcast version or the live version.
Or both.
Or both, that's right.
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.